and welcome to the recording of the 2020 Partners Ask the Experts industry webinar. This session was hosted by our careers consultant for the law school, Joss Harrison, and she's joined by our guests Joanne Smallwood, the early talent recruitment manager at top law firm Womble Dickinson, as well as Chris Kessling, the head of programmes at the Inns of Court College of Advocacy. The start of this session, both Joanne and Chris will be going through short talks to tell you a little bit more about themselves, their careers and the organisations that they're representing. Joss will then lead our guests and the partner students that were able to tune into the session live in a Q&A to provide further insight, which we hope you'll find useful. Without further ado, we're going to pass over to Joanne Smallwood to tell you a little bit more about herself, her career and what Womble Dickinson does.
So good afternoon everyone. My name is Joanne Smallwood. I am the early careers recruitment manager at Womble Dickinson, and just to give you a bit of an overview as to who we are as a business, we are a transatlantic commercial law firm. I've been with the business now for just over 10 years. When I joined, it was actually a regional firm. We were Dickinson D's, which quite a few people certainly here in the Northeast will refer back to, and lovingly called Dickie D's. So that was the firm that I joined a long time ago now. But we have changed quite considerably. So we became a national firm when we merged with Bond Pierce, which was a predominantly sort of Southwest law firm. And then we combined, rather than merge, with our US partners, coming up 3 years now. And that then formed Womble Dickinson, or WBD, as I shall refer to, because it is quite a mouthful. And as I say, we are a commercial law firm, sort of all areas of law really, sort of not sort of negligence and family and criminal, but otherwise more or less everything else, all service law firm. And we've been working with Newcastle for a number of years now, well before my time, but certainly partners. It's been something we've supported for a number of years and sponsored, and are very proud to sponsor. And I think it's such a fantastic opportunity for you guys to gain some experience over your summer break and to see sort of whether this is the right career path for you, and hopefully pick up a great skills base and at the same time. So basically my role within the business is sort of early careers attraction. So basically the life cycle of a recruitment process. So I would be looking after things like brand management, workforce planning, strategy, all the way up to kind of development and implementation of a recruitment process. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions around our recruitment process, which consists of quite a few different stages, which you will tend to see within most recruitment, graduate recruitment these days, not only within law, but the wider recruitment within the graduate sphere. So applications, online videos, online exercises, assessment days, placements, interviews. So again, more than happy. Please do bend my ear about everything. I'm not precious, I'm not secretive, and I always want to get across the fact that I am not a gatekeeper of your position that you want to apply for and gain. We're very much here to help facilitate that for you. And these kinds of sessions are really there to kind of help you answer those questions and hopefully say that we are quite open and want to make sure that you're comfortable with the processes. So for me, I think, I suppose top tips wise, and I'm conscious that we've only kind of got 10 minutes, so I'll rattle through these quite quickly. I'm not going to sit and do my normal presentation. But what we look for predominantly when we're looking at recruitment is your drive and motivation, which I think spending your summer doing something like this obviously highlights that point, and for me, continue to do things like that. Thinking, resilience and adaptability. I think a lot of people are a little bit worried, especially where you are now with regards to the current situation. But what a brilliant thing to have on your CV as to how you adapted and became resilient coming through a global pandemic. Not everyone's going to be able to talk about that because it's not happened in their generation. Communication, really very important. Teamwork and commitment to the business and our clients. So they tend to be the main sort of behaviors that we look for throughout the recruitment process. So for me, I think the starting point with regards to advice is just keep doing what you're doing. The fact that you're actually either attending this Zoom meeting or you're watching the recording, it's a great start because it does show that commitment, as I say, that drive and that enthusiasm. But for me, I think some of the things that you need to start thinking about is kind of the work experience, employment and interests that you have, and to start kind of pulling together a bit of a CV that you will use as your master CV, and talk about what you've gained from each experience, very much around not just the skill set, but actually how it might have changed your mindset, the way that you think, how it's helped develop you as an individual. And try and think about the language that you use. Try not to use too much generic sort of terminology. When we talk about teamwork, talk about your position within a team. How are you actually a good team member? Are you empathetic? Are you the one who kind of motivates? Are you a naturally positive person that people kind of gravitate to help motivate that team and push them forward? So really do start to think about what it is that you can bring to the table that's very individual to you, because certainly with our recruitment, it's high volume. And individuality really does help you stand out and progress through the process and become successful. But one of the other things I suppose I want to highlight mainly on this conversation is to start to kind of engage with what's going on around you, and know that the law school and the career service especially are absolutely fantastic at offering you these different opportunities, placements, work experiences, employer engagement. Please do take that up. But also think about some of the things that you can proactively do as well. So I thought, as an example, I'd just tell you the kind of things that I'm engaged with, especially here in the northeast of England. Obviously, this is where I'm based, this is where I'm from, I'm very proud of it. But thinking about things like Anyone, Northeast Times is a great publication and website to kind of go on. Especially at the minute, they've got the Legal 500 of the Northeast, so it gives you a real insight into who's based here and the practitioners that are based here as well, and the work that's done, and the big ticket work that's done that people automatically assume is done in the city, and it's not. It's done here in Newcastle. But also things like the Chamber of Commerce, any kind of local enterprise partnership. The Newcastle LEP is brilliant, Northeast LEP, sorry, with their project management. They've got some great sort of tiles that tell us what's going on within the region, where the status is, who's working on it. So again, it kind of allows us to see that you're interested in the region. And I would expect this across the board with regards to our candidates, because we want to understand why you want to work in Bristol office, why you want to work in our Leeds office, our London office, our Plymouth office. So really engage with what's going on around you, but it is about being proactive and actually finding those opportunities yourself. And if you're not sure, obviously ask the question, and people will point you in the right direction. But now's the time not just to concentrate on your study, which obviously is important, but it's thinking about the bigger picture and how you can bring something different to the table. And as I say, that individuality and that drive that you have for the law.
Thank you to Joanne for that really insightful talk. We hope you found it useful. We now pass over to Chris Kessling, who, amongst working as a barrister at Garden Square Chambers and the head of law at BP Law School, is now the Inns of Court College Advocacy Head of Programmes.
Hello, just a quick introduction about myself. My name is Chris Kessling, and I am Head of Programmes at an organisation called the Inns of Court College of Advocacy. And essentially, this organisation has two principal roles. It is involved in the continuing education of practicing barristers, particularly in relation to advocacy and professional ethics. And we have something new that starts actually in September, which is a bar course designed specifically for prospective barristers who wish to be called to the bar, to go on to do pupillage and then to become practicing barristers themselves. So effectively, we're involved at a postgraduate level from when you want to become a barrister. We take you through the bar course, get you called, get you, we hope, into pupillage, and then you will see us again during pupillage and thereafter when you're actually practicing yourself. So we're there for the whole journey of the bar. I'm a barrister. I was in full-time practice for 21 years as a criminal barrister, not doing the sort of stuff that Joanne does at Womble at Dickinson. But again, it makes a good point that actually there are practice areas, whether you go down the bar route or the solicitor route, really for anyone, and they're incredibly diverse, and the spectrum of specialist areas out there really is quite extraordinary. But let me just talk about the bar for a moment, because there are around at present 16,500 barristers. I think that compares to around 150,000 solicitors or thereabouts. So the bar is far smaller than the other branch of the main principal branch of the legal profession. And barristers, there's a lot of crossover between what barristers and solicitors do. And indeed, there's many examples where really they do precisely the same thing. And there's a number of examples similarly where they do very different things. But barristers are principally known not just for their specialist legal services, their specialist advice, but also for their advocacy expertise. And when you look at the training involved in the bar as compared to the training involved to become a solicitor, there is a far greater emphasis on advocacy for the bar than solicitors. So to give you an example, if you were to start our bar course in September, I appreciate you're not there yet, but if you were going down that route, you would be doing a minimum of 42 individual advocacy sessions in relation to your bar training that you would be assessed upon in terms of your what are known as witness handling skills, cross-examination and examination in chief, and also your skills in submitting matters of law and arguments to judges. So those really are the areas that there's a particular emphasis on. And really, advocacy is the driving force for most people that want to become barristers. It's very easy when you think about public speaking, because if you were to go on Google now and type in the things that most people are scared about in life, you would probably find public speaking right up there with them, often greater than the fear of death, greater than the fear of heights, greater than the fear of clowns. I've even seen that. So there's an awful lot of things that people are very scared about, and public speaking is one of them. But actually, the more you become involved in public speaking, the more you actually work on your ability to articulate an argument, to persuade an audience to your point of view, whether you agree actually with the argument you're advancing or not. And that's one of the key concepts. Actually, the more you become involved and the more you start to enjoy it. And actually, for many people, they start public speaking really to conquer that fear, and then they become quite hooked on it and think, do you know what, I wouldn't mind doing this for a living. And that's what really is the driving force for a lot of barristers. So just as Joanne was giving what I thought was really valuable advice in terms of the sort of thing you should involve yourself in, and really this is a good stage to start thinking about the bigger picture. The bigger picture for the bar is very much involved in public speaking. Because if this is something that really is a driving force for you, then you want to demonstrate your commitment to becoming a barrister and your dedication to the bar, you really will have to show on your CV that you have done a lot of public speaking. There are two traditional ways that people get involved in public speaking. One of them is through debating. You'll find at when you're at school, university, and when you move on to bar school. There are numerous competitions out there involving debating. And there's another form of advocacy which a lot of students involve themselves in, which is mooting, which effectively is where you're put in a mock courtroom situation. You're given a legal argument, and don't worry yourself, because normally it's a legal argument that actually there is no right answer to. That is the concept with most practitioners. You realise the difference between academic law and law at a practitioner level is that not only is there no right answer, but you've actually got to give an answer when you're in practice. You've got to say to a client, well, okay, this is where I think you should go, because it's a solution-focused job. You've got to actually assist the client. That's why they come to you, and that's why they pay you a significant, sometimes, amount of money. So what I would say to you now is have a think about public speaking. And you know what? Where you are, all of you right now, is a great time to start making your mistakes. And every single barrister, whether they reach a very high level in the judiciary or whether they become a top QC in their field, whether it might be shipping law, international trade, crime, chancery, so there's a whole spectrum of work. But whatever it might be, they started somewhere. There was a time for all of these people where they had to stand on their feet for the first time. And you will not meet a single lawyer, practicing barrister or solicitor, who won't cringe at some stage about something that they did horribly wrong in their career. I'm not talking about something unethical. I'm just talking about where you opened your mouth at the wrong time, or you explained something perhaps in a slightly clumsy way, or often for barristers, where you stood up and you just felt you wanted the ground to swallow you up because you were so filled with fear. But you get over that and you fight that, and that actually starts to give you the confidence. And each time you make a mistake, you learn from it. And whatever route you choose, actually the concept, what a lot of people call these days self-reflection, is a really good one, because it's the ability to actually analyse what went wrong, pick yourself up, and make the best of it. In the same way that if you fall off your bicycle, you think, okay, perhaps I'm not going to go over that particular hill again because it wasn't a great idea. So you learn from the experience. The bar is, just to finish this off, because I realise I've been going for a while, not quite up to my 10 minutes yet. But the bar really has a place for anyone who is really interested. And that's both within the self-employed bar, which really makes up just over 80% of the bar, or the employed bar. There are a lot of barristers working in an employed capacity, whether with firms of solicitors or alternatively within government or government departments, within, for example, the Crown Prosecution Service, within MI5 or MI6, the security services, with banks. There's all sorts of public and private enterprises that barristers, just like solicitors, are involved in. So never think when you go down one route or the other that in some ways it completely prescribes your future, because it doesn't. There's an awful lot of overlap, and there's an awful lot of opportunities out there for the future. So it is it's certainly a profession I would recommend. I think genuinely it has something for everyone. It has a vast amount of opportunities, and if you're interested in public speaking, it really is something you should give serious consideration to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. And indeed, thank you to Joanne as well. Thank you for those great insights. We're now going to have some time to take some questions from the audience. Now, I do have one question that I think somebody who's here actually submitted earlier, so we could start with that. Aisha, I think it was your question. Now, If you like, would you like to unmute your microphone and ask it yourself?
I can do it.
Brilliant, that would be fantastic.
My question was, what skills do you think will become more important for inspiring lawyers to have in the next 5 or 10 years?
Okay, who'd like to step in with that
Is that
one?
one for both of us, Aisha?
Yeah, both of you.
Well, I'll deal with it from a bar perspective. The skill that you'll require both now and in 5 years' time and in 10 years' time is the ability to communicate. That is the key skill that was required 50 years ago and will be required in 50 years' time. There will be necessarily changes in the way that people practice, and I think COVID-19 has been an excellent example of that in fact, you know, a lot of us now communicate remotely, just as we're doing now. And sometimes, therefore, you have to adapt the way you communicate, both to that technology and to the circumstances. But that doesn't detract from the key skills at play. And really, it goes back to what I was, from the bar perspective, what I was saying earlier. You've got to be able to put together a coherent argument. You've got to be able to articulate your point clearly and persuasively, because really that's what you're being asked to do. And the more experience you can get in that, the better. Remember that whatever firm, chambers you apply to, the fundamental question they're asking themselves is this person, if it was you, Aisha, is Aisha going to make, from the bar perspective, a good barrister in this chambers? And that encapsulates a number of what are often referred to as competencies, but fundamentally they mean qualities and skills. Yet, has this person developed a number of these skills? Do we believe that she is committed? Will she go on and therefore become a productive member of chambers, to not just in the sense of getting on with people, but principally in the sense of, will she be able to do the job to the standard we expect her to? And when someone therefore is analysing you, they're looking back over at your CV to see what you've done to demonstrate that commitment, because often you hear people talking about passion and dedication, and they're great words, but if you have a CV without experience, they're meaningless. The CV's got to be an evidence-based document. It's got to demonstrate what you've done, and not just what you've done. If you've had work experience, what you've actually gained from it. Why was it a valuable experience? If you don't say so, it probably won't go anywhere else. So I don't think the fundamental key skills will change. For the bar, they are communication first and foremost.
Yeah, I think that is basically the same for us. At the end of the day, what you need to remember is that we're a service provider. We have clients, and you need to build that relationship. You need to build that rapport. And as much as technology has come into law, we already have AI within our law firm. A lot of automation does happen, and you will read articles about the robots stealing your training contract. That is not going to happen. Certainly as a junior lawyer, you're going to be on the grounds of working with this new technology and helping us develop and use it correctly. And as far as I'm concerned, it's the things that it spits out the other end is only going to be as good as what's put in at the front end, and that's where you guys will come in. Yes, it might mean there's less manpower required for certain things, and I'm sure if you talk to lawyers that have been in the business for a while and they had to sit in a room and compare documents quite literally with each other, going down the pages. Now you've got DocuManage that will do that in seconds. I'm sure they would have appreciated that a few years ago. So I think a lot of people think that this IT skill set is required. To a certain extent, yes, you have to understand what's out on the market. You have to understand what firms are using, but that would be expected anyway, having a grasp of Word, Excel. Such a hypocrite, because I am rubbish with Excel. But things like that, which make your life so much easier, your working life so much easier when you understand the formulas you need to put in, if you can do VLOOKUPs, all of these jazzy things. Just things that might take me half an hour will take my colleague David, who's our statistician, like literally seconds. So there's a skill set that you will always need to have around IT and an understanding of it. But for me, I completely agree with Chris. It's the softer skill sets that have always been required, will continue to be required, if not more so, because that relationship is what's going to set you apart from those who are just churning out the tech based sort of advice, basically. And I suppose touching on the point that I made before around understanding your region and the businesses and the business that you're going into, all of that comes into play as well. And if you don't have that curiosity and you don't have that proactivity and reflection, then you're just going to end up maybe being left behind. And so for me, communication is not just how you speak to people, it's how you engage. And it allows you to communicate in a much more professional, business savvy way, especially in commercial law, where you need to understand the wider implications of what's going on rather than just the black letter law, which is all that the IT systems will understand. They will never understand maybe the bigger picture and how that fits into the client's individual issues and problems that you're there to solve, basically. So as much as I think you do have to bear in mind what's going on and you do have to change with the times, the softer skill sets will always be the ones that will stand you apart going through a recruitment process.
Okay, thank you very much, Joanne. Aisha, does that kind of address your question for you?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
This is about the relevant work experience that would be realistically attainable for somebody in their first year at university. So somebody who is very focused, wants to get going and get something law related on their CV. Chris, what would your advice be to somebody in their first year?
Well, there's once you're at university, it does open up further opportunities, actually, as far as the bar are concerned, because one of the key areas that really you want to explore in terms of work experience are mini pupilages, where you spend usually between a couple of days to a week at a set of chambers, i.e. where a number of barristers work in various practice areas. You can apply with a CV and a covering letter. You need to look up the various chambers in the area that you want to go, and it's relatively straightforward. Occasionally there's an application form. But when you're at university, chambers are happy to take you on. When you're a student at a lower level, they're a little bit concerned, because it's important when you go along to do a mini pupillage to remember that you are an observer. That's it. I mean, you will be given some work to do. You might be asked to, for example, look at a barrister's advice to a client, perhaps to do a bit of legal research. Don't worry, you won't be expected to take responsibility for the final document, but it's to get you involved with it. But you'll go to court, you'll go into the robing room, you'll meet barristers, and you'll meet solicitors and legal executives and people, generally professionals involved in the court system. And you'll go to court and you'll watch barristers involved in advocacy. And it's a really, really important way to really understand how the bar works, to understand how the bar interacts with solicitors and vice versa, how those two parts of the profession dovetail and gel together. And because the bar, even though members of the public can go to barristers direct, in fact, the bar is still survives as a referral profession principally, i.e. that solicitors send work to barristers to do a particular job, either in terms of to do some legal advice or to go to court to represent a client. That's principally what barristers do. So it's a really, really important way, a mini pupillage, of understanding what the bar is about. And you will be expected by the time you apply for a pupillage really to have at least 4 of these on your CV. You don't have to do a huge amount more than that, but it's important that you have that. It's also really important, even though this might sound counterintuitive, to many sets of chambers to see that you've got work experience working with solicitors. And that's precisely for the reasons I've just outlined. You need to understand the approach and working practices of the far largest part of the legal profession that the bar relies upon. And the bar does rely upon solicitors, and it's really important to recognise that from a barrister's perspective. So it gives you a wonderful insight when you go and work with solicitors. You know, if you wanted to do crime, for example, or immigration or family law, then many high street solicitors are really where you want to go. If you want to go into perhaps more finessed and detailed commercial law, then, you know, Joanne is Joanne's firm, Womble, Dickinson is the type of firm that you want to be looking at. But again, there's lots of avenues out there. To go along and spend time with solicitors gives you the opportunity really to say, do you know, why do you actually brief, why do you send work to X, Y or Z barrister? They might say, oh, because he or she is fantastic in court, or really good with a particular type of client, or because they always respond really quickly when we send them work, and we really like that. You know, all of this stuff builds up your knowledge base. So that's really, really important. When you're in your second year at university, you can, if you're doing a law degree, you can do something that really can make a massive difference. Which is you can join an inn for a start, and that's really useful because at the Inn of Court, Gray's Inn, Lincoln's Inn, Middle Temple or Inner Temple, not only do they give scholarships if you want to go on and do bar training, but they also conduct so many educational exercises which are really, really helpful. And they can organise something called marshalling, where you actually go and sit with a judge for several days or a week. And that's really useful because actually you see everything from the judge's perspective. But you can also join something called the Free Representation Unit, where you can go into the Employment Tribunal or the Social Security Tribunal. You can represent clients in I was about to say a realistic environment. It's realistic because it's real. You are representing clients in just as you would in court, and therefore, because you've actually undertaken legal advice, given advice to these clients, legal research, given advice to these clients, and stood up in court representing them, that's really the gold standard of the type of thing you can have on your CV. There are so many examples of things that you can do in terms of work experience, but those are the 3 key principal ones. Often at the bar, people talk about mini pupillages, marshalling and mooting as the 3 M's, they often refer to them, which are really important.
I think ours is slightly different because we don't really have a set list of work experience criteria or employment. Very similar to the points that Chris made around if you can get legal experience across the board, I think it's helpful for you as a candidate, because I think it helps you become more confident about where you want to be with regards to the routes you want to go down, the types of firm that you might be interested in, areas of law that you have an interest in. Again, a good point made earlier was that in practice, law is very different. But certainly for us, we appreciate, especially within first year, that jump between sort of A-level and trying to get your head around university. You could be moving away from home. There's a lot of things kind of going on. And there's a lot with regards to sort of that diversity piece around whether somebody has the time. They could be full-time carers, they could be in full-time employment because they're putting themselves through university. So there's only so many hours in the day. So we don't expect an exhausted list. But again, a point I made, at the beginning of the conversation was that your career service at Newcastle are brilliant. Honestly, Josh has not.
I'm paying Joanne later.
But we do a presentation together. May not happen, I assume, this year, maybe, but where we kind of talk to those who are coming into uni their first year, and I sit there and just watch how much the career service kind of can do for the students. And so therefore, from an employer's point of view, I know that those opportunities are there for you, and I would expect you to try and take as many opportunities as you possibly can, because you do need to have something on your CV, you do need to have something on your application. I appreciate how difficult it can be to get legal experience. We offer insight days where you come in and spend time within the business. We tell you about the firm, give you maybe a bit more of an insight that you would do than just kind of looking at the normal sort of websites and things like that, and give you a sort of an idea of what kind of skill set we look for and how you can demonstrate that. But we can't offer work experience to everyone, unfortunately. We normally have around 200 to 300 that come through our structured program each year, predominantly from A-level students. So we can't offer that. So we appreciate that you can't necessarily get that level of legal experience. But again, the tips that Chris mentions around marshalling and going, just sitting in the public gallery, that is the easiest way to get some kind of knowledge of what's out there, because again, that relationship between solicitor and barrister is evident there. And also it's a great way of starting that network, which you will use throughout your career. You need to become a networker. You need to make sure you form those relationships at university. When you leave, you all start becoming decision makers at the same time. But it could be that you bump into somebody and you start chatting to them and you say, would you mind if I came in and spoke to you for half an hour? Can I spend a few days with you? As they say up here, shy Ben's getting out. So you need to ask the question, but unless you put yourself in those positions, unless you are in the same environment that you'll find the practitioners in, you're not going to get that opportunity to even ask the question. So there are opportunities there. So we would expect, as I say, something on your CV for you to talk about. And if it is a case that you're not able to accumulate a huge amount, especially in first year, then tell us about your interest, your hobbies. Certainly on our application, we call it life history rather than work history. And the reason we did that is a lot of people tend to self-edit around their work experience as well. So if they think it's not relevant, they don't put it down. So I remember a few years ago, a lady I was speaking to who she wasn't going to put down that she was a teaching assistant. So why would you not do that? Anybody who can look after 6-year-olds is like herding cats. If you can do that, then the amount of and transferable skills that you have in that position is amazing. You need to tell us about these things. Don't assume that because it's not commercial, it's not legal, it doesn't have value. And that being said as well, around if you're part of a reading group, a walking group, a band, tell us about that, because that's where your passions are. And as I said at the beginning of my sort of piece, individuality is how you set yourself apart in our recruitment processes. We have over 1,200 applications for 25 training contracts. If you can't be yourself, if you can't be who you are as an individual, then you just end up in a generic group of people who probably will be very good lawyers, but unfortunately we just can't progress you through a recruitment process that needs to get 1,200 people down to 25. So work experience is a vital part of that, and telling us what you gained from that experience is much more important to us than what you did on that day as well. So make sure, again, how you frame everything is very important.
Okay, thank you very much, both Chris and Joanne. I see we've got a couple of questions. I think, first of all, I think Jacob, you had your hand up to ask a question, did you? Would you like to?
I was going to ask, I've been interested in pursuing like the criminal side of law and becoming a barrister like Mr. Kessling. But I've been discouraged from pursuing a career as a barrister because the work can be less consistent, and like, you know, it can be a bit more, like the salary can be a bit more wavering than being a solicitor. So I was just wondering if you had any insight on that.
Well, I mean, there's no salary as a barrister because unless you're in the employed sector, because you are self-employed. So yeah, necessarily you have to make that decision. Self-employment has with it a certain level of flexibility on the one hand, but a certain level of risk on the other. So you have to buy your own books, you have to buy your own computers, you have to set up your own pension. All of the you have to get your own gym membership and lots of things that, you know, come as part of the package in employment you don't get as a barrister. But it very much, when you look at the financial side, because there is such a spectrum of work, there is a massive spectrum of income. If you choose to go down the publicly funded route, such as criminal work or family work, there is an awful lot less money there than there would be if you went down, for example, the high levels of commercial work or intellectual property work, chancery work that encapsulates an awful lot of that type of that spectrum of work. So I can't go into exactly what you would get because the reality is, even within various areas, lots of barristers will make lots of different levels of income. But you're right to raise, if you like, a red flag around crime, and you could raise the same flag around any publicly funded work at the moment, because it would be wrong to say that there aren't real concerns about those areas of the bar. But it's not just the bar, it's solicitors as well who are engaged in public funded work. Fundamentally, because it is publicly funded, there is a real restriction from the government on the amount of money going in to that area, and to the courts. I mean, some of the courts are crumbling because they're fundamentally not looked at. And if you were to read, and I recommend you do, The Secret Barrister's book, Stories of the Law and How It's Broken, it will give you a very good insight into what's happening with the criminal courts at the moment, and the criminal law and those engaged in it. The bar is very good at adapting and being flexible. And if you look at a lot of the better criminal sets of chambers, you will see that an awful lot of the members of chambers don't just do crime. In fact, they have spread their practices to utilise and evolve their key communication skills into other areas. Sometimes, for example, they can be taken into more commercial aspects of the law, which perhaps those chambers wouldn't have previously been involved in. So the reality is, a lot of barristers went into the bar because they really wanted to stand up and be in front of a jury. But they recognised actually to make a living from that in this current environment is extremely difficult, and therefore their practices have evolved. So, and the chambers have evolved into doing lots of other work, for example, into sports law, because there's an awful lot of tribunals in sports law, whether it's football, whether it's Formula One, and actually there's been a transition for a lot of people very successfully into that area of practice and other corresponding areas of practice. It's one thing about the bar, because it's small, it is good at adapting. It's very good at being, if you like, to reacting to its circumstances. But it would be completely wrong to say that it's going to be an easy ride, because not only is the bar incredibly competitive to get into, and particularly this year because of COVID, there's only around 200 pupilages available. There are over 3,000 people going for those pupilages. Normally there's about 400 to 450 a year, but still with 3,000 people every year trying to get them. So it's incredibly competitive, it's expensive to get there. No one's hiding away from that, and you have to therefore be realistic. what I would say is you have to make your own decision, and the best way of making your own decisions is to be informed, because decisions are only good if they're informed decisions. And that's why work experience and contacts and networking, as Joanne was talking about, is so important, because it really enables you to start understanding the profession you're going into, how it's operating. Please be aware that an awful lot of people are very willing to give advice, but actually very often, particularly within the, and I'm not obviously talking about professionals from careers services, I'm talking about fellow students or other people who actually haven't been directly involved within or at the very beginnings of their careers, and they'll say, oh, well, I heard this and I'll tell you about that, and this is what's happening. Actually, they don't really know what's happening. You've got to make that decision for yourself. And I don't know a single barrister who hasn't been told by many, many people, whatever you do, don't become a barrister. Principally for all of the reasons that you're saying, and many of them have gone on to have incredibly successful careers. And as I say, one of the beauties about becoming a lawyer, and this is true of the bar and solicitors, that actually just because you go down one route doesn't mean that's the road you have to continue down. There's a lot of opportunities to move left and right, and actually to formulate your own plan within that. So make your own informed decisions and just get involved. When I was, sorry, I'm going on, I'm very good at giving very long answers to simple questions, but let me just say this. When I was where you are right now, I simply didn't know whether I wanted to become a barrister or a solicitor. I had no idea. And I did a summer scheme at Clifford Chance in London. I did lots of mini pupilages, and I was able from that experience really to determine the route I wanted to go down and the practice area that I wanted to go down. And actually it was sitting in the Old Bailey watching an attempted murder case with this QC opening the case in crystal clear terms and describing this man walking through the snow holding a knife in his hand on the way to try and stab someone. Just in the way that he did it, I just thought, this is what I want to do. And that's when it crystallized in my own mind that was the route I wanted to go. I wouldn't have been able to make that decision if I hadn't had that experience, or to describe when in an interview situation, when you're asked, why do you want to become a barrister? Or as it would be on the other side, why do you want to become a solicitor? You need to give a really good answer to that question, and one that's authentic, and really basing it in an experience that you've had is really important. I couldn't agree more with what Joanne said earlier about just going to court as an observer, as a spectator, and just sitting there, taking that time. Again, imagine how impressive it would be in an interview, answering why you wanted to become a solicitor or a barrister, to say that you've watched something in court, and them saying, oh, you want to work on work experience. You say, no, I just went there myself. I'm just really interested. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I've actually bought the Secret Barrister book on Audible, so I'm going to give that a listen shortly.
Good. That's excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris. I think Taylor, thank you, Taylor, has added a question to the chat box. Hopefully, Taylor, is it okay if I just read this out? And Taylor's question, I'll put this to you, Joanne, initially, is how valuable are experiences like studying abroad or a year in industry? What are your thoughts?
As far as I'm concerned, any experience is good experience, but if you can get that kind of experience, I think it helps you grow as an individual, as a person, getting that independence. And again, it just gives you something really interesting to talk about. All we want from an interview is to get to know you, and certainly the CV and the application is the first sort of introduction to you. But if you, again, sort of touching on the things that Chris is highlighting, if you can just talk about with passion and saying, look, I took the initiative, I did this, I had a year, I went abroad, I really And it's fine if it's the kind of traditional year abroad, and see if you can kind of twist that into something that's suitable, and don't tell us about any kind of blue moon parties or what have you. People have done in the past, like, no, tell us about the culture that you enjoyed. But no, it's, for me, I think anything that can kind of help broaden your horizons and give you new experiences. In general, we should be doing that. Never mind just thinking about our careers and our future employers. I think the reason you're going to university is to kind of meet different groups of people who you may not necessarily have crossed paths with before, or seeing different parts of the UK that you've never been to before, standing on our own 2 feet that most of us probably haven't done until this stage. At 40, I still sometimes haven't done that. So anything where it's industry placements or working abroad, if you can get that Erasmus year, is really valuable, because it gives you something to talk about, it gives you a reason to grow, it gives you, again, a new perspective on things. And as I mentioned, around kind of engaging with what's going on in the local area, and I genuinely check anyone in North East Times all of the time, because I'm just interested and nosy around what's going on in my region, because it affects me. But those types of experiences really do highlight that you're happy to kind of broaden your experiences, and again, it adds a different depth dimension to your CV. So certainly, if you do get those opportunities, I would grab them with both hands.
Can I just probably put in my oar there as well, because when I work with students in the law school who have come back from doing either some time overseas studying or working, I think they really appreciate it. I think they come back kind of almost like different people, just the, broad view on the world, increased confidence. I mean, it's not for everybody, but I think it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, we second our trainees out to our clients for 6 months, and they come back, like you say, quite different, so much more confident, and because they've kind of had to stand on their own 2 feet. They're still supported by the business, but they're not sat there with their supervisor. They are very much within our clients. They are representing our business. But they come back so much more commercially minded as well, because they understand how in-house legal teams work, the sort of pressures that they're under, what you would think is a nice succinct piece of advice in how many pages you want to send through. Actually, no, they want to even half that. And they kind of understand the pressures that, as a client, when we're sort of dealing and working with in-house lawyers, they can appreciate their point of view so much more, and they do come back with much more knowledge about the profession and how you engage with people. So anything where you can just push yourself out of a comfort zone, which is something that we all tend to try and avoid. And again, the point that Chris made around public speaking, I absolutely hate it, and it's something I do for a living. But it's something that it's practice, and it helps with the nerves. And that's the same with kind of moving abroad, doing placements, all of that feels really scary and daunting to begin with, but at the end of that placement, at the end of that year abroad, you'll come back a much more confident person, which can only benefit when it comes through to a recruitment process.
Thank you very much, Joanne, and I hope, Taylor, that gave you what you were looking for. I am conscious of time, and I have been asked, I've got one more question to put to both Chris and Joanne. Before I do that, though, I just wanted to say a couple of things to the students, because I'm guessing you're coming to this conversation with like lots of different levels of knowledge. For some of you, you might be really well informed and know all about mini pupilages and different types of law firms. For some of you, you might be hearing about some of these things for the very first time. Don't forget that when you hopefully arrive here in the autumn, that there will be so much support from you, from the career service. You're going into a fantastic law school with some fantastic student societies. So there'll be so many people that you can ask for advice and get help and support from. the thing is to do it, just to keep going little bit by little bit. So that was one thing I was going to say. The other thing I was going to say is, you might be sitting here thinking, okay, I'm doing a law degree, but I'm not sure I want to be a lawyer, or what happens if I change my mind. Now, we did originally have a third speaker for this event. He's a law graduate who is actually on the graduate training scheme with the National Health Service. Unfortunately, he was rather busy today, so he had to cancel it. But that was an illustration that should you wish to take your learning and your skills into a different environment with your law degree, you absolutely can. So there are options for you. So please do remember that. So sorry about that, sort of going slightly off tangent, but I do have a final question, which hopefully I could just fit in quickly for both Joanne and Chris, which is this. I'll put it to you first, Chris, if I may. Based on your experience, both of your own career and of being involved with students wanting to get to the bar, what would be the one bit of advice that you would give to our audience today?
Enthusiasm is the key word in my view, because enthusiasm drives energy. It drives the understanding and the willingness to get involved in what's around you. And the more you get involved and the more you really generate that enthusiasm, people feel that enthusiasm, the more they'll be attracted to you, the more opportunities will become available to you. And actually, this won't feel like work and building a bar CV. You'll be energized by the process, and it will become a natural and enjoyable process. And if it's natural and enjoyable, it means you're doing the right thing. If it's painful and difficult, it means you're doing the wrong thing. And I think everyone's got to be cognizant of the fact that actually the law isn't going to be for everyone. And sometimes you discover that in the process. And, you know, therefore, a law degree is a great thing to have. It demonstrates a number of transferable skills, and you can move off and do something else with it. But I think it's personally perfectly okay to actually decide, do you know, I don't want to become a lawyer. Or if I do want to become a lawyer, but I just don't want to be a barrister. That's not for me. Or I don't want to become a solicitor. That's not for me. But enthusiasm will really drive the process forward, I think, in the most natural possible way.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. The behavior list that I gave you before, the one that's always at the top is drive and motivation. And we can't instill that in you. You have to want to be in our profession. And as Chris said, if it feels like a chore going off to sit in the court, or to go and find some work experience, or to go along to a presentation or a networking event, then this is not where you're meant to be, and that's fine. It could be that you think, actually, do you know what it is? I'm wanting to do this law degree because it opens a lot of doors, and it's interesting. It could just be the simple study, and a lot of people do go to university and study law because of the subject matter. They have no intention of being lawyers, and that's fine. But if you want to be a practicing solicitor, and if you do not engage with what's being offered to you, then unfortunately it is a very, very competitive profession. And I don't want to make people disheartened, and again, it's just being truthful. You will not succeed, because there are people who will get up out of bed in the morning and go off to a law fair or a careers fair or a presentation. It might be raining outside. You have to want to do this. And if it does feel like a chore, then it is a case of maybe looking at whether this is the right profession for you. And you do look to the careers service and say, look, these are the skill sets I really enjoy and what I'm gaining. What is it that I can do as a profession? Don't feel as though you have to follow your peers. I think sometimes, especially when you're coming into a second year of a law degree, when you suddenly have to think about, oh, I need to get a training contract. I need to think about the different experiences I need to kind of, or you feel like you have to tick off. And then it's so easy to get swept along. And don't do that. Just be brave and just go, do you know what? I'm going to wait until the end of my degree. I'm going to make a decision then. I might decide to go into extra study. I might decide to go into a completely different profession altogether. And that's fine. I think you should take some time to think about it, because it is competitive. It's a long process. Ours runs from October until July, if COVID wasn't happening. So for me, I think there's a lot of opportunities out there, certainly at the moment. Maybe not necessarily at your level currently, but if you're going in first year, and I can only see this staying around, and one of the benefits of our current situation is there is a lot of virtual events now, so similar to this, where there's internships online. Certainly for us, from our firm's point of view, we are going to try and do a lot more with regards to virtual internships to allow for wider participation, to let you see what the profession's about, to help you guide that kind of final decision. But if you don't have that drive, that motivation to do it, then I would question why you're putting yourself through it, to be honest.
Okay. Thank you very much. So enthusiasm, drive and determination are the things. Okay, I just wanted to say a few thank yous. First and foremost, thank you so much to Chris and Joanne for taking the time to come and do this. I've learned a lot. I hope the audience too have found it helpful. And so thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to this recording of the Partners 2020 Ask the Expert session. We hope you found the discussion and the presentations from our guests useful and insightful. Remember to stay up to date with further advice from alumni and industry professionals. Subscribe to our Newcastle University Career Service YouTube channel, and you can follow us on our social media channels at NCL Careers on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. We hope to see you in September. Good luck and take care.